I walked into the room with my shoulders tight and my heartbeat pounding clearly in my chest. The room wasn't big, but the cold overhead light and the ticking of the antique wall clock made it feel like I was standing in the center of a courtroom. Every eye turned toward me. No greetings, no friendly gestures. The air was thick, like they had gathered here to cast me out of their lives once and for all. The long table was covered in a white cloth, dark leather chairs lined up neatly on both sides, more fitting for a dispute than a memorial. I gripped the hand of my 8-year-old daughter, Lily. She looked up at me, her clear gray eyes reflecting the worry I was trying to hide. I smiled at her, stiffly, but just enough to keep her world from crumbling. "Karen, I see you still had the nerve to show up." The voice dropped the temperature in the room a few more degrees. That was Meredith, my sister. Her blonde hair was pinned up, lipstick a shade of red straight out of a 1950s fashion magazine. But her words were as sharp as a blade wrapped in silk. "Guess you didn't get the memo that Dad cut you out of the will last year." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had expected this reception, though my heart never quite got used to being cast aside by my own blood. I quietly pulled out the chair for Lily and sat next to her, the only seat left, farthest from the center of the table. At that moment, my uncle, Martin, leaned back in his chair and let out a dry laugh like he'd just finished watching a dark comedy. "I thought you'd at least have the decency to stay away," he said without looking at me. "Or are you here to say a final sorry to your father, though it's far too late for that?" Lily curled inward, her tiny hands clutching the hem of her dress. I laid my hand over hers, gently soothing, but my eyes remained alert, scanning every look from the people around us. Those who once called me niece, sister, daughter. Now they looked at me like a stranger, like my presence alone was an offense to this family. I couldn't remember the last time someone called me sister. Ever since I left the house after my marriage fell apart, I had been erased from every holiday, every phone call, every family story. Meredith told the tale of me leaving like it was a stain she had to bear, a burden she had to carry because I abandoned our father. No one asked why. No one cared to know why I left with Lily when she was just 3 months old and I hadn't even recovered from my C-section. I looked around the room. Once our father's small library. Old photos still hung on the walls, but I was missing from every one. They had cropped me out of the frames, and out of memory. Meredith was whispering something into her husband's ear, the man who'd never once welcomed me. Next to them sat our cousins, watching like they already knew the ending, just waiting for their happily ever after. The door opened. My father's personal lawyer, Mr. Donald, stepped in, carrying a brown leather briefcase and a thick file. The sound of his shoes was slow but certain. He nodded to everyone, but when his eyes met mine, he paused longer, not with sympathy but consideration. Everyone in the room thought they knew what was coming. They believed I had come to confirm once and for all that I had nothing. No message, no memento, no explanation. But they didn't know I wasn't here to beg. I was here because my daughter had said something to me yesterday. "Mom, if Grandpa still remembers you, you need to know. Let's go, okay?" And I said yes, not for my father, for Lily. Because she deserved to know the truth. Whether it was a long, heavy silence or a surprise no one saw coming. I breathed slowly, still holding Lily's hand. Across the table, Meredith smirked in triumph. But I kept my gaze on Mr. Donald, who had just placed the briefcase on the table and was beginning to open it. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but somehow I knew this story wasn't over. Meredith crossed her legs, arms folded like she was chairing a shareholders' meeting, not her father's will reading. Her tailored gray suit and sparkling wristwatch shimmered under the overhead lights, a silent announcement. She was the chosen one, the rightful heir, the only Jefferson name their father still acknowledged. I glanced at Lily, still sitting quietly beside me, her small hands neatly on her lap, eyes scanning the unfamiliar room. She said nothing, but I could feel the tension in her. The way she tilted slightly toward me, seeking safety, made me squeeze her hand tighter. No matter what anyone in that room believed, I was still Lily's mother. And if I had to endure being rejected once more, at least this time, I wouldn't go through it alone. "No one needs you here, Karen," Uncle Martin suddenly said. His voice was raspy, like someone who had lived too long on bitterness and cigarettes. "Your father was clear. You're out of the will. You know that, right? Or are you still clinging to some fantasy he'd forgive you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Words like that didn't hit the way they used to. Uncle Martin, like many in that room, clung to an old image of me. Karen the weak, Karen the defiant, Karen who walked out on the family for a marriage Dad never approved of. They didn't know, or didn't want to know, that the man I once loved was gone, leaving me alone with a baby and sleepless nights at my desk job. I didn't leave to betray. I left to survive. Beside him sat Aunt Celia, a woman who hadn't called me once in a decade but sent birthday cards to Meredith every year. She looked at me, eyes narrowing, not with anger, not with disgust, but pity. Cold, sharp pity that cut deeper than any insult. I turned away, determined not to let that gaze burn into my mind. "Some people really don't know shame," Meredith said, her voice calm but calculated. "Why are you here, Karen? To hear the lawyer confirm again that Dad erased you from his life?" I lifted my head and looked straight at her. "I'm here because I have every right to be. Whether you like it or not, I'm still his daughter." The room went still for a beat. A few people glanced at one another like they'd just been splashed with cold water. My response wasn't loud, wasn't angry, but clear enough for them to understand. I wasn't here to beg. I was here because I belonged. I sat in silence, listening to the wind slip through the window crack, mixing with the soft scratch of fountain pen on paper as Mr. Donald flipped through his notes. Everyone waited, not to remember, but to confirm positions, shares, entitlements. It felt like a private auction, where people were valued by loyalty and how well they played their roles. A soft chuckle came from the left side of the table. It was Edward, my cousin, the one who once built sandcastles with me on Cape Cod when I was 10, now laughing like I was the family's running joke. "Still think you have a chance?" he muttered, just loud enough for Lily to hear. She turned to me, her little face suddenly steely. It wasn't fear I saw. It was disappointment. Not in me, but in the world. She was beginning to see more clearly. "Lily," I whispered, gently brushing her hair. "It's okay. Just stay with me, all right?" She nodded, lips pressed tightly. She was stronger than her 8 years, and I knew, if there was any reason I hadn't fallen apart in front of those eyes, it was because of her. At the head of the table, Mr. Donald tapped his pen lightly against the folder. His calm voice filled the room. "If everyone is ready, I'd like to begin." Everyone straightened up. Meredith folded her hands like she was ready for a victory speech. Uncle Martin leaned back, eyes narrowed like reading between the lines. Aunt Celia pulled a handkerchief from her purse, as if bracing for some emotional crescendo. And me, I just held Lily's hand, because I knew my name wouldn't be in the opening lines. But like every room that once turned its back on me, I had learned to walk in, head held high, and wait to see who feared the truth more than I ever did. I used to think that if I stayed silent long enough, the whispers behind my back would fade away. But as the years passed, they only grew louder, clinging to me like smoke that refused to clear. My family never cared why I left. They already had a story. I was the daughter who didn't know sacrifice, the one who abandoned her father when he needed her most. The selfish sister who ran away from family duty. That story, crafted by Meredith, amplified by Uncle Martin, gradually became the unchallenged truth no one bothered to question. They didn't know, or didn't want to know, that I once came back. 3 months after leaving my husband, I brought Lily to my father's door, carrying her in one arm, a single suitcase in the other. I remember it was drizzling that day, not enough to soak my hair, but enough to chill the air. I knocked, hoping that no matter how angry he was, my father would still open the door. He used to say, "Family is the last place that won't shut its doors on you." But that day he did. The old oak door closed, cold and silent, like the period at the end of a sentence. I stood under the porch for nearly 2 hours. Lily was 6 months old, crying nonstop from hunger and cold. It was my father's neighbor, Mrs. Graham, who finally came out, pressed an umbrella and a business card for a single mother's center into my hand. I walked away as darkness fell, without looking back. From that day forward, I understood that if I wanted to survive, I had to learn how to no longer need anyone from that house. I rented a small apartment in the suburbs of Newark. My first job was a night shift cashier at a convenience store. Then I slowly moved into part-time bookkeeping for an insurance company. Everything was slow, but peaceful. I did everything I could for Lily, from mending torn sweaters to saving every spare coin to buy her books. Our life wasn't glamorous, but at least it didn't include accusations or contemptuous stares. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still thought about my father. Not out of anger, but because I still hoped. Hoped that maybe he had come to understand something, or at least wondered why I had left. He was the only one who ever taught me how to untangle a fishing line, how to arrange lilies so they wouldn't wilt. He was the only one who ever truly listened when I said I wanted to study interior design instead of accounting. But after I married someone he disapproved of, a free-spirited artist, emotional and impulsive, it all collapsed. He didn't like who I chose, but what he never understood was that I chose to break free from a family where emotions had to be polished before being presented. After that marriage, when the man who once painted me pictures turned into the man who yelled at me daily, I knew I had to stop. But when I came back with our daughter, my father only one person knew the whole story, Mr. Donald, our longtime family lawyer. Last year, when he called to verify some documents related to a scholarship fund, I asked him directly, "Did my father ever mention me?" He hesitated, then said softly, "I believe he was still following your path." That answer didn't erase the years I'd been shut out, but it was enough to keep a flicker of hope alive, that maybe, somewhere deep down, a part of the old father still remained. And maybe that's why I came to the will reading today. Not for the inheritance, not to fight for anything, but to see if, in his final moment, he left something. Not the house, not the retirement fund, but a line, a message, something to prove I was never completely forgotten. I looked around the room, at the faces waiting. They thought I came to beg. But what they didn't know was that the only thing I ever wanted was something money couldn't buy. The truth. And I had a feeling that somehow that truth was getting very close. Mr. Donald set the folder down on the table, his eyes sweeping the room as if weighing the air. The room fell silent. The only sound was the soft rustle of pages between the tension. I could hear every heartbeat in my chest, steady but fragile, as if one deep breath could shatter everything. "The last will and testament of Mr. Harold Jefferson," he began, his voice deep but steady, like someone who'd read hundreds of wills but still respected every word. Meredith leaned forward slightly, hands neatly folded, eyes gleaming with triumph. Next to her, her husband Brandon pulled out his phone under the table, probably texting the architect they'd spoken with last week. They had already been planning renovations to the main house before our father even passed. "I, Harold Jefferson," Mr. Donald continued, "being of sound mind and judgment, do hereby divide my estate as follows." I heard the words, but they felt distant. Each sentence hammered deeper into the reality I had suspected. My name was not there. "To my eldest daughter, Meredith Jefferson, I leave the entire main house and the adjoining property, along with all furnishings and valuables contained within." Meredith raised an eyebrow, saying nothing, but I saw the subtle curve of her lips, a silent but unmistakable victory. "To my brother, Mr. Martin Jefferson," Mr. Donald went on, "I leave the lakeside property, including ownership of the cabin and the fishing boat. Uncle Martin nodded, his expression unchanged, but I knew he was pleased. He loved that lake more than anything. Except control. To my nephew Edward, Mr. Donald paused to flip a page. I leave the vintage car collection along with all titles and related accessories. I looked at Edward, my cousin, who hadn't even looked at me at the funeral. Now he stroked his chin, nodding like it had all been predetermined. I said nothing, but each word, each sentence, was confirming what I had braced myself for. I had no place in this will, not even a line, not a note, not a goodbye. And then the line came, like a clean cut slicing through what little hope remained. And as previously stated, Mr. Donald slowed his reading, my youngest daughter, Karen Jefferson, shall receive no portion of this estate. The room went dead quiet. No one spoke right away. But a heartbeat later, Meredith let out a soft snort of laughter. "Told you," she whispered to Brandon, but loud enough for me to hear. Uncle Martin shook his head, casting a look of mock pity toward me. "Takes a special kind of person to turn their back on their own father," he said, with that half-joking tone he always used when speaking of me. Like I was some side note unworthy of discussion. Lily sat beside me, not fully grasping the words but feeling the heavy silence all around. She turned and whispered softly, "Mom." I gripped her hand tighter, holding back the emotion. I had known this was coming. I had played this scene out in my head 100 times. But nothing prepares you for seeing your name officially erased from your father's life, in front of your entire family, without feeling something fracture. I took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the wood grain of the table where the light struck in almost hypnotic swirls. Around me, murmurs began. Meredith was saying something to Brandon about starting basement renovations early. Edward was already on the phone. I caught snippets like, "Move the cars into the garage this weekend." No one spoke to me. No one asked what I was thinking. They had ended this long ago. I was just the late arrival to a play that had closed years before. But what they didn't know was this. I hadn't come to claim anything. I came to listen, to confirm, and if needed, to close the last unfinished chapter in my heart. I didn't need the house. I didn't need the things. What I needed was the truth. I hadn't yet decided whether to get up or quietly wait for everyone to leave when Lily suddenly turned to Mr. Donald. Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't rushed, but clear enough to freeze the entire room. "You forgot the video he recorded." Everyone turned. Meredith, Uncle Martin, Edward, Brandon and his wife, even Mr. Donald furrowed his brows. I looked at my daughter, my palm suddenly cold. I whispered, almost breathless, "Lily, what are you talking about?" She didn't look at me. Lily's eyes stayed on Mr. Donald, calm and direct, strangely composed for an 8-year-old. She reached into her small backpack, pulled out a slightly wrinkled white envelope sealed carefully with brown tape. On it, in familiar bold letters, "For Mr. Donald. Only if it gets ugly." I nearly choked. I recognized that handwriting instantly. It was my father's. "Lily, where did you get that?" I asked, voice trembling, my hand shaking as I gently touched the envelope. Lily turned to me, her eyes clear and steady. "The last time I visited Grandpa," she said, "he gave it to me and said to keep it safe. He told me to give it to Mr. Donald if people forgot something important." No one said a word now. Meredith tried to maintain her composure, but I could see her lips pressed tightly together, her face growing pale. Uncle Martin leaned forward, and Edward slowly set his phone down on the table. Mr. Donald took the envelope with both hands, his expression filled with caution, as if he were holding something more valuable than any legal document. He glanced at me, then at Lily, before carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a small black USB drive and a folded note, also handwritten, signed at the bottom. He skimmed the lines briefly, then looked around the room. When he spoke, his voice no longer carried the tone of a lawyer doing his job. It sounded like someone holding a secret too heavy to keep. This is a video recording made by Mr. Harold Jefferson prior to finalizing his last will. He left instructions that it should only be played if the reading of the will became contentious. He paused, then added, "And I believe today meets that condition." Meredith let out a short, bitter laugh. "This is absurd," she said, her voice higher than usual. "A video of unknown origin has no legal standing." Uncle Martin jutted his chin. "There's no proof it wasn't altered. Harold never mentioned this to me." But Mr. Donald was already on his feet, walking to the laptop on the side table. He plugged in the USB, and within seconds, a single video file opened. On the screen appeared my father, Harold, seated at his desk in the familiar study. He wore the light brown cardigan I had given him years ago. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his eyes looked straight into the camera. The room went completely still. I felt the world freeze as my father's voice came through, hoarse but clear. "If you're watching this, Karen, it means things didn't go as I hoped, and I'm sorry." I turned to stone. His voice continued, slow and steady. "I know you're being left out of the will, and I agreed to it at the time, thinking it was the right thing to do. But the closer I got to the end of my life, the more I reconsidered. And I realized I was wrong. Wrong to believe what others told me. Wrong not to ask you once why you left." I couldn't hold back the tears. Beside me, Lily clutched my hand tighter, as if she'd always known this moment would come, and had waited until I was strong enough to face it. "I met Lily," he continued, his expression softening. "She didn't say much, but when I asked her about you, she said, 'Mom is the safest place in the world.'" The murmurs behind me faded. I heard only his voice, the voice of a man I believed would never understand me, now admitting fault, calling my name with a tenderness I thought had vanished forever. On the screen, my father's face, Harold Jefferson's face, looked both foreign and heartbreakingly familiar. He no longer had the stern expression I remembered. Instead, he looked gently tired, like someone finally releasing a weight he had carried too long. "Karen," he said, his voice rougher and deeper than I remembered. "If you're watching this, then the will didn't go as planned, and maybe that's my fault." I felt frozen. My hands were numb from gripping Lily's so tightly. The room was silent, pulled into every word echoing from the tiny speaker. "For years, I let pride and anger drown out everything," he went on. "I believed Meredith when she said you left to avoid responsibility. I trusted Martin when he said you'd turned your back on the family. I didn't ask. I didn't investigate. I just closed the door. And because of that, I lost you." Those words cut like a blade, but the kind that peels away the layers I'd built to survive since walking out of that house. "When you came back holding Lily," he said, "I remember looking out the window. I saw you standing in the rain. I saw the look in your eyes. And I still didn't open the door. Because I thought I was right. I thought you owed me an apology." I heard Meredith shift slightly in her seat. Brandon lowered his head. Uncle Martin crossed his arms, his lips pressed into a hard line. They were trying to stay composed, but none of them could ignore the truth unraveling in my father's voice. "And now, looking back," he continued, staring straight into the camera like he was speaking directly to me, "I see it clearly. You were the bravest one in this family. You left when there was no other choice. You protected your daughter. You stood on your own after everyone turned away. You didn't come back for money. You came back because you deserved to hear what I should have said a long time ago." I couldn't stop the tears. They fell silently, not in a rush, but steady, like every year of pain was finally being washed away. "I'm proud of you, Karen," he said, his voice dropping low, thick with remorse. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making you believe you weren't enough, weren't worthy, weren't loved. The truth is, you made it through all of it with your heart intact." Lily looked up at me, her clear eyes pulling at something deep in my chest. I wanted to hold her close and cry. But I stayed still. My father wasn't done. And because of that, he said, I revised my will. One final version, sent directly to Mr. Donald, fully executed and legally binding. The air in the room thickened. I leave this entire house to you, Karen, he said, along with my savings account, retirement stocks, and a scholarship fund for Lily. I want her to have the chances you didn't. I heard someone inhale sharply. Maybe Edward, maybe Meredith. Uncle Martin leaned forward, clearly about to object, but Mr. Donald raised a hand to keep him quiet. I know this will upset some people, my father said, as though reading their reactions through time. But I'm not doing this for fairness. I'm doing this for truth. And the truth is, you deserve every good thing I can leave behind. The screen began to fade to black, but before it disappeared, he looked into the lens one last time, his gaze softening. Exactly like the way he used to look at me when I was little and scared of summer storms. You are my daughter, he said gently, and I love you. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it. Live well, for yourself and for your daughter. Don't let them take your heart again. The screen went dark, no music, no effects, just silence, deep and heavy, like a final confession. I sat there, still clutching Lily's hand. Inside me was a storm, not of rage or regret, but of something I hadn't let myself believe in for years. My father had heard, my father had seen, and in the end, my father chose me. The room sat in thick silence after the screen went black. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. Everyone seemed frozen between two worlds. One filled with the cold calculations they'd just been discussing, and the other where the truth had just thundered in like an unexpected winter storm. Meredith was the first to break the silence. Her chair scraped back suddenly, screeching across the floor. Her face was pale, but her eyes still clung to the last shreds of pride. No, no way, she said, her voice shaking but clipped. He never changed the will. I took care of him. I was with him until the very end. No one replied. Brandon stood up more slowly, trying to place a hand on her shoulder to calm her, but Meredith shoved him off without a word. She stormed toward the door without even glancing at me. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving behind a cold emptiness in the space where she had been. I didn't feel triumphant, just quiet. Uncle Martin, still seated, stared at the USB as if it were something that could bend reality. He turned to Mr. Donald, voice low and tense. How do I know that video was real? He could have recorded it before he started losing his mind. Mr. Donald calmly sat back down, both hands resting lightly on the table. The video was recorded 2 weeks before Mr. Harold passed away. It is time-stamped and legally notarized. Additionally, I was present when he signed the revised final will. Uncle Martin clenched his jaw, clearly trying to find an angle to argue, but there was nothing to hold on to. Everything was legal. Every word my father had spoken in the video and every portion of the estate that had been reassigned had been thoroughly processed within the bounds of the law. It was strange that a man like him, so quiet, so disciplined, chose to end it all with such a dramatic twist. Edward, my cousin, who had once looked at me with thinly veiled contempt when I walked in, now sat frozen like a statue. I glanced over at him and saw his face caught in a storm of emotion, part disbelief, part confusion, that my father, the man they all assumed had taken their side, had ultimately chosen mine. I didn't think he'd actually do it, Edward mumbled, unsure who he was speaking to. Then he stood, grabbed his coat, and quietly left the room. No one stopped him. A few other relatives followed. No comments, no farewells. Just silent backs walking away, leaving behind empty chairs like quiet witnesses to a truth that could no longer be denied. I stayed seated, still holding Lily's hand. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her relief. She'd held on to this secret longer than I realized, and now she could finally exhale. Only the three of us remained in the wide room, me, Lily, and Mr. Donald. Mr. Donald gently closed the folder, his voice deeper now and softer. The revised will is going to be sent to each involved party, along with documents confirming its legal validity. There will be some paperwork to sign, but everything is already arranged. I nodded, unable to find any words. I thought I'd feel pain or anger or the urge to scream at the world for all the years I was left behind, but I didn't. What I felt was peace. Not the hollow kind of silence I used to endure during long nights in that cramped apartment while Lily cried. Not the awkward hush at family gatherings where no one spoke to me. This was a quietness filled with resolution, the kind that only arrives when the truth finally speaks. I looked around the room where my father once wrote meticulous notes, fixed the old wall clock, folded paper airplanes for me when I was little. This room, which I thought no longer belonged to me, had opened its doors again. This time, not to shut me out, but to welcome me back. "Thank you," I said to Mr. Donald, my voice soft but firm, not just for doing the right thing, but for listening to him. He offered a faint smile, stood up, and left the room with footsteps as light as the change that had just taken place. Lily looked at me, her eyes shimmering with something I hadn't yet put into words. Maybe pride, maybe relief, or maybe a new kind of belief, that no matter how long it takes, the truth always finds its way. The room now held just the three of us. Me, Lily, and Mr. Donald. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the large window, casting a golden hue across the wooden floor, warming a space that once felt unbearably cold. I stayed seated, as if my mind hadn't yet caught up to everything that had just happened. I had been given the house, once a place of rejection. The savings account, the college fund for Lily, the entire estate everyone believed would go to Meredith, was now mine. But what I walked away with from that reading was worth far more than property. It was recognition. "The revised will goes into effect immediately," Mr. Donald confirmed once more, noticing I hadn't spoken. "If you need any legal assistance, I'm here to help." I nodded, managing a faint smile in place of words. But my throat was tight. All my life I had longed to hear one simple thing from my father. That he believed in me. That I was worthy of love. And now I had that. Not in words alone, but in undeniable action. A video, an apology, a rewritten will. All of it was my father's way of saying, "I saw you." I looked down at Lily. She was still sitting quietly, her small hand in mine, her wide eyes taking in the dust-laced corners of the room, like she was trying to remember every detail. "You did good, Lily," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you." She tilted her head and smiled. "I just wanted you to hear him." I brushed her hair gently. "You kept a really big secret." Lily nodded proudly. "He said to wait for the right moment. I thought today was it." I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. My daughter, just 8 years old, small and silent, had carried an entire truth for months, only to bring it into the light when no one could deny it anymore. Not Meredith, not Uncle Martin. No one could take that truth from her now. I stood up, the weight on my shoulders falling away. No more shame, no more fear or second-guessing. I moved slowly across the room, glancing at each chair, remembering every look that once held contempt. Now, those eyes were gone, leaving behind a silence big enough to echo the truth. As we stepped outside the grand doors, the setting sun bathed the stone steps in gold. A cool breeze passed by, and I shivered, not from cold rejection, but from the gentleness of spring's first wind. A breeze that hinted at something new. I paused at the top of the steps, gazing at the house that had once only symbolized pain. Today, it was no longer a place I'd been cast out of. It was where my father called me home, through his final will and his final words. "Do you want to see Grandpa's room?" I asked Lily. She squeezed my hand, eyes sparkling. "Do you?" I thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, but not today. Today I just want to go home. With you." We stepped off the porch together. I looked back once more, then exhaled deeply. Everything that needed to be said, he had said. Everything that needed to be done, he had done. The rest was mine to carry. The small car waited by the curb, sunlight glinting off the windshield. I opened the door for Lily and she climbed in with a lightness that said she had laid down a heavy burden. I walked around to the driver's side and slid into my seat. As the engine turned over, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror, my eyes still misty but no longer sad. Steady. Free. Whole. I once walked away from that house in tears and loneliness. Today, I walked away with my daughter, the truth behind me, and the future ahead. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the one left behind. I was the one who had been seen, heard, and finally I could just be me, no more proving required. From someone cast aside by her family, Karen journeyed through pain and silence to reclaim herself and the truth. Her father's long overdue acknowledgement wasn't just a gift. It was proof that strength and dignity are never in vain. In real life, Karen's story reminds us, even when misunderstood or rejected, your worth isn't defined by momentary approval, but by your courage to live honestly, love yourself, and trust that truth will one day rise. What are your thoughts on Karen's journey and the choices she made? Share with us in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, emotional stories about family and life. After a weekend-long family gathering, I returned to my small apartment in Seattle, completely exhausted. Everything seemed normal, at least until I opened my banking app to transfer money for the electric bill. My eyes went blurry at the number on the screen, $83.52. I checked it 3 times, then again, certain it wasn't a glitch or my tired eyes playing tricks. Just 2 days ago, I had over $9,000 in that account. I felt the blood drain from my body. My heart pounded like someone was knocking from inside my chest. With shaking hands, I immediately called the bank. After a few security questions, the rep said, "The transactions were made from a device previously logged in, same IP address as a personal computer." I stood up, grabbed my keys, and drove straight back to my mom's house, the same place that just hosted our biggest family gathering of the year. I still couldn't shake the images of everyone hugging and laughing from my mind. And yet, just hours later, I stood there again, in the old kitchen I grew up in, reaching for a glass of water from the cupboard, my heart still reeling from shock. "You're back already?" My sister Amanda's voice floated in from the living room, casual and carefree like nothing had happened. She sat on the couch with her legs crossed, holding a glass of red wine, not the slightest hint of concern on her face. "I just checked my account." I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tightness in my throat betrayed me. Nathan, my brother-in-law, walked out from the kitchen holding a soda can. He leaned against the fridge, looking half amused, half dismissive. "Oh, that?" Nathan smirked. "We needed that money more than you did, Alyssa." It hit me like a slap across the face. I froze, stunned, unable to form a single word. Amanda chuckled softly, shrugging like I was overreacting. "Don't be so dramatic," she said. "You've got a good job, no debt, no kids. You live alone." I turned to my mom. She was sitting in the corner knitting, her expression as calm as ever. "Mom, did you know about this?" She sighed, not looking up. Her voice was gentle, like I'd just complained about the soup being too salty. "You're always so sensitive. You have more. What's wrong with helping a little?" I turned to my dad, who was glued to his phone. He mumbled without looking up. "Don't use harsh words. It's family business." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But how did you even get into my banking info?" Amanda shrugged. "I used Mom's computer and saw your account was still logged in. If you didn't log out..." She said it like I was the one at fault, like what they did was perfectly justified. My hands clenched, nails digging into my palms. My heart was racing. Nathan shrugged like this was all no big deal. "It's not like we bought luxury stuff, rent, groceries, just to survive. Otherwise, we'd be starving. I looked at them. All of them. Not one apology. Not one guilty look. Not even a proper explanation. What did I do to deserve this? I whispered, though no one seemed to care. Amanda tossed her hair back and mumbled, "You can earn it back. Don't be so dramatic." I slowly picked up my purse. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay. My mom only said, out of habit, "Don't forget Sunday dinner." I walked to the door, heart pounding, empty inside. But before I left, I paused at the doorway, hand on the knob, then looked back. "If you think I'm just gonna let this go, wait and see what happens next?" Amanda giggled. "Oh, please, you're being so theatrical. Honestly, Alyssa, we needed that money more than you. Don't be selfish." I didn't respond. Outside, it had started to rain, and inside me, another storm was quietly building. I drove through the rain, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The traffic light ahead was red, but my mind was spinning with every cold word I'd just heard. We needed that money more than you. No remorse, no apology. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I didn't want to go home yet. I needed air, so I pulled into the parking lot near Green Lake Park, where I usually jog on Saturday mornings. I turned off the engine, sat in silence, and reopened the banking app. That number was still there, just as shameless and cold as Amanda's face. I couldn't say I was completely surprised. I had just hoped. When I was 27, I got hired as a marketing manager at a major pharmaceutical company. While I was still adjusting to the job and new life, Amanda called. "Hey, my phone got cut off. Can you spot me some cash?" I didn't think twice. They were family, right? Then came Nathan, unemployed for nearly 6 months. "Just need a few hundred to get by until I find something," he said. I stayed quiet. One year, for Haley's birthday, Amanda sent me a suggested gift list. The cheapest item was over $200. I wanted to say no, but then my mom called, her voice sweet. "You're not getting anything for your niece. She's so excited. You're better off than the rest of us." And just like that, I became the first person they called for money troubles. Amanda got a new car. I chipped in on the down payment. Nathan lost his wallet. I wired money that night. Mom's electric bill overdue. I dipped into savings. Every time, all they had to say was, "You're the most stable one in the family." They never once asked, "Are you doing okay?" Never stopped to think. I had days where I counted every dollar, skipped vacations, or put off buying things for myself. A few months ago, I turned down a vacation with my best friend because I used that money to help Nathan with rent. Amanda, they said it like a compliment, but now I realize it wasn't gratitude. It was an unspoken declaration, "It's your job." The rain kept falling. I turned on the radio, hoping the noise would calm the ache in my chest. But nothing could soothe the feeling of being seen as a tool. Not a daughter, not a sister, just a credit card with a heartbeat. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Amanda said you're upset about the money. Don't make a big deal, sweetheart. We're family." Family. Why did that word feel so heavy now? I used to think if I just stayed patient, generous enough, they would realize. Maybe say thank you, or at least ask how I was. But they never did. Because in their eyes, I didn't need help. And the one who doesn't need help is expected to help everyone else. I took a deep breath and opened my notes app. Every payment I ever made, every late-night call, every time I denied myself for them, I started writing it all down. Not to ask for it back, but so I'd never forget. Never let myself be put in that position again. The rain began to ease. Pale sunlight peeked through the gray clouds. I sat up straight, hands on the wheel. This time, I wasn't looking back. That night, I returned to my apartment, still reeling from Nathan's words echoing in my mind. "We needed that money more than you." No apology, no explanation, just pure, unbelievable entitlement. But what truly kept me up wasn't the lost money. It was the family's complete indifference in the face of it. I couldn't let it go, and I didn't plan to. The next morning, I called the bank and requested a full transaction report from the past 10 days. The file was 17 pages long. I printed it out and marked every suspicious charge in red. One anonymous transaction caught my eye. Almost $2,800 from an IP address. That matched my mom's house. Yes, I'd used a computer there before, but never logged into my bank account and just left it open. I had only checked email and my calendar. Someone in that house had accessed it, remembered my info, and waited for the right moment. That weekend, I returned to Mom's house like it was a casual visit. The roast smelled the same as always, but the air was thick with tension. Amanda sat at the head of the table, avoiding my eyes. Nathan was overly relaxed, pouring lemonade like there wasn't a fire burning under the surface. I didn't waste time. I reviewed all my transactions, I said, placing the paperwork on the table. My account was accessed from Mom's computer. I was here that day, yes, but I didn't log into my bank. So, who took the info? No one answered. My mom kept her head down, picking at her salad like I'd just asked about the weather. Dad sat in silence behind his open newspaper. Only Amanda spoke, her voice small but laced with sarcasm. You left it logged in. It's not like we hacked into anything. I looked straight at her. So you admit it? Amanda shrugged. I just saw it open. You didn't lock it, and it's not like it's the first time you helped. I didn't agree to this time. Nathan set his glass down with a soft clink. You're always so dramatic. This isn't stealing, it's helping each other. It's family. No, I said firmly. Helping is when someone asks and the other agrees. This was taking, without asking. My mom finally looked up, her voice gentle like she was explaining something to a stubborn child. Elisa, you live alone, have a good job, no burdens. Amanda's raising a child, Nathan's still figuring things out. Family is about sharing. And sharing means quietly draining my entire savings? My voice began to tremble, not from anger, but from pain. My dad folded his newspaper and looked up, visibly annoyed. Don't be so harsh. You've always been the strongest one in this family. You know no one else could handle it, so everyone trusted you. Trusted me? I let out a dry laugh. Stealing personal information and emptying my account? That's what you call trust? Why not just call it what it is, taking advantage? Amanda slammed her hand on the table, the first time she lost her cool. We didn't splurge on anything. It was for rent, medication for Haley, car repairs. I'm exhausted. You're exhausted. What about me? I looked at each person in that room, the people I once called family. I was exhausted too. When I worked 60 hours a week to pay off your debt, when I canceled my vacation just to keep Nathan from getting evicted, when I ate instant noodles for 3 weeks to help Mom pay the utility bill, I'd been tired for a long time. But I never complained, because I thought I was doing the right thing, but clearly all I did was enable everyone's selfishness. No one said a word. Only the ticking of the kitchen clock filled the silence. I stood up, grabbed the folder and my purse. Before leaving the room, I paused and looked at Mom. If this is how you treat the only person who never asked for a single cent, don't be surprised when I start taking back what I deserve. Nathan let out a mocking laugh. What are you going to do, Alyssa? Call the cops? I looked him straight in the eye, my gaze steady. Just wait and see. Then, I walked out of the house I once called home. For the first time, without a trace of regret. Only a rising sense of resolve in my chest. I got home just as dusk settled over Seattle. The air felt thicker than usual, heavy with the fury still brewing inside me. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled out a file folder. I had kept receipts, messages, transfers, email confirmations, even screenshots from years ago. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew, someday, my quiet sacrifices would need proof. I began organizing everything. From the very first payment, $92.50 for Amanda's phone bill 3 years ago, to the biggest one, $3,200 wired to Nathan for an urgent issue. I had full bank statements, email confirmations. Over 3 nights, I built a spreadsheet, categorizing each expense. I color-coded everything. Green for medical, yellow for living expenses, red for the ones with no justification. Like the $1,350 Nathan spent on a gaming console last Black Friday. I remembered it clearly because I had to skip a winter trip with coworkers just to make my insurance payment. On Monday morning, I went to the Financial Crimes Division downtown, bringing all the printed documents, a USB with the spreadsheet, and a completed complaint form. A young officer named Harper took my case. She flipped through each page, nodding as she read. We'll begin a preliminary investigation under financial fraud and unauthorized access to personal information. Do you have names of the individuals involved? I do, I said, handing her the list. Amanda Walker, Nathan Walker, Donna Grant, my mother, Paul Grant, my father. I left the precinct under gray skies, but with a flicker of light inside me. Not because I wanted them punished, but because I finally stopped staying silent. 2 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, I was in a Zoom meeting when an unknown number called. I muted the call and stepped onto my balcony to answer. It was Harper. Ms. Alyssa, we've completed the preliminary investigation. We have sufficient grounds to move forward. The investigative unit will visit the individuals' residences today. I froze. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, more like relief. After all these years, someone finally saw what I had endured. That night, while I was preparing dinner, my phone rang non-stop. First Mom, then Amanda, then Nathan. I didn't pick up. The texts started pouring in after, "Call your mother now." "What are you doing, Alyssa? Did you really call the police?" I didn't respond to any of them. An hour later, I got a text from an old neighbor. "There are 3 people in jackets labeled Financial Crimes Unit outside Donna's house. They asked about you too." The next day, I arrived at work early. As I stepped into the elevator, I caught a few curious stares from coworkers. Then my manager approached me. "We received a call from a local reporter asking to verify a financial investigation linked to your name," he said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "We didn't confirm anything, but if you need time, just say the word." I smiled softly. "It's okay. I'm doing the right thing." That evening, I sat by my window, watching the lights glow from the surrounding apartments. Amanda's words still echoed in my head. "I swear, this family only survives because of you." Yes, they survived. Because of me. But they never saw me as a person, just a wallet, a tool. And now, that tool had said enough. I opened my journal and wrote one line. "I am not the family bank. I am Alyssa." For the first time, I saw my name on a page not tied to a bill or a money transfer, just my name, a person, and freedom, finally within reach. The first message came that Monday morning as I was getting ready for work. My phone screen lit up with a familiar line. "Call me, Mom." I didn't open it. An hour later, as I poured coffee, her voicemail came through. "Alyssa, this is going too far. I know there's been misunderstandings, but you don't have to take it this far. Can you please call me back?" I set the mug down, a chill running through me. Her voice was the same, soft, gentle, as if By noon, Amanda sent a long text. "My bank account is frozen. I can't pay Haley's tuition. I don't know what to do. You win, okay? Are you happy now?" That last sentence made my skin crawl, as if this was a game I started, as if they were just unwilling players dragged into it. But I knew the truth. I wasn't trying to win. I was just done enduring. The next day, Harper called with an update. "Alyssa, we've confirmed the amount withdrawn and misused. Amanda is now under investigation for unauthorized transfers. Nathan is implicated in withdrawing funds from an unapproved device. and your parents used part of the money for illegal mortgage payments, which could be subject to recovery. Oh, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me hurt, not because of the consequences they now faced, but because they still didn't understand how it ever came to this. That night, Nathan called repeatedly. I blocked his number. Less than 10 minutes later, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. Alyssa, please. I've been suspended from work. They're investigating my accounts. I can't lose everything over one mistake. Can't you say something to help me? The arrogance, the mockery, the laughter from before? Gone. Replaced by thinly veiled panic. But I didn't flinch. Thursday morning, I got a message from my dad. He rarely reached out, so even one line made me pause. The bank sent a foreclosure warning. If we don't pay in 30 days, we lose the house. I read it over and over. No apology, no admission, just a cold statement and a faint hope that, like always, I would step in to fix it. I didn't reply, but that night, standing by my window watching the streetlights spill across the glass, I thought of all the times I skipped lunch to wire Mom money on time. The dates I canceled because Amanda called me in tears. I'd given not just my money, but my peace. This time, I wasn't going back. That weekend, I drove toward the Edmonds shoreline, a place where Dad and I used to go fishing every summer when I was little. No one knew where I was, no one asked how I was doing. The same people who called me their lifeline now only reached out to salvage the damage they caused. Mid-afternoon, my phone lit up again. A message from Mom. Alyssa, I'm begging you. I know I was wrong, but if we lose the house, I don't know how I'll survive. Please, don't abandon me. I stared at the screen for a long time. That message made my chest tighten. But not from guilt. From the realization that even now, she was thinking about the house, not me. No one asked if I was okay. I set my phone down and stepped onto the sand, letting the ocean breeze blow away the heaviness in my chest. I knew I had entered the hardest part. The part where they'd call me cruel, ungrateful, even destructive. But also the part where I was no longer expected to carry what was never mine to hold. I looked out at the vast water. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about bills, money requests, or late-night calls. I was thinking about me, and the peace I was finally starting to feel, piece by piece. 3 weeks later, I filed for an extended leave of absence. Without telling anyone, I packed everything neatly into a rented car and left Seattle on a gloomy Wednesday morning, driving across the state like I was shedding the old skin of a woman smothered by unreasonable expectations. I arrived in Boulder, Colorado, a small town I had passed through years ago on a work trip. Back then, I only had a few hours to wander around the downtown area, sip coffee in a cozy cafe with soft jazz and warm yellow lights, but the calm I felt that day stuck with me. Now, it became the place I chose to begin again. I rented a small studio apartment overlooking the mountains. White walls, big windows catching the morning light. Within days, I bought a new desk, filled vases with fresh flowers, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to clear space for someone else's needs. I changed my number, told my company I'd be working remotely for an indefinite period, and strangely enough, once I stopped being drained by my family, my energy returned. I slept better, ate regularly, and when I sat at my desk, my mind felt clearer than ever. Just 2 weeks after settling in Boulder, my boss, Julian, called. Alyssa, I just reviewed your new strategy plan. It's brilliant. Have you considered taking over as regional coordinator for the entire West Coast? I paused for a moment. A year ago, if I had heard those words, I probably would have said no. Because I still had to worry about Mom, about Amanda, about Nathan. But now, I looked out the window, where sunlight was sparkling through the pine trees, and answered firmly, I'm ready. Julian chuckled. I knew you'd be the first person to come to mind. Congratulations, Alyssa. When the call ended, I made myself a cup of tea, curled up in a knit blanket on the balcony and let the breeze run gently through my hair. I had done it. I had pulled myself out of that cycle. The cycle where I was always the one giving and no one ever asked, "Are you okay?" No more late-night messages. No more desperate calls like, "It's just a loan. I'll pay you back by the end of the month." No more checking my bank account every morning in quiet panic. Now, every message I received was from people who truly cared. Coworkers, old friends, or a few new ones I'd met through yoga classes in Boulder. No one asked for money. They simply asked, "How are you feeling today?" Or "Want to grab dinner tonight?" I hadn't just found freedom. I had found myself again. One afternoon, I went back to the coffee shop from years ago, sitting at the same table by the window. The shop owner still remembered me, faintly. "You've been here before, haven't you? Weren't you the one who asked about the jazz track I was playing that day?" I laughed. "That was me. And now I live here." He pointed outside the window. "This place heals a lot of people." I nodded. There was nothing more that needed to be said. That night, I wrote in my journal. I spent my youth guarding a door for a family that never wanted to come in to see me, only to take what was inside. Now, I've locked that door, and I'm keeping the key for myself. This new life wasn't loud. There were no cheers, but it was quiet. And to me, that was the most luxurious thing I had ever owned. Didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Amanda might call one day, her voice trembling. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. Not because I didn't love them, but because I'd learned to love myself first. One crisp fall morning, as I watered the plants on my balcony, my phone pinged with a new email. I didn't look right away, but a few minutes later, sipping my tea, I opened my inbox and paused at an unfamiliar name. Melanie Carter. It took me a few seconds to place her. Melanie was Amanda's cousin-in-law, someone I had only seen briefly at a couple family gatherings, a quiet girl who always stayed in the background and never spoke up. I hadn't even known she had my email. The subject line read, "Thank you, Alyssa." Curious, I opened it. "You probably don't remember me well. I'm Melanie, Aunt Grace's daughter. Amanda once asked me to babysit Haley one summer, and you drove me home after Haley's birthday party." I stayed silent for years, thinking I didn't have the right to speak up. But after learning what you did, how you stood up, how you drew a line, I couldn't not send this message. I sat frozen. Every word she wrote felt like a drop falling into the still pond inside me. I was stuck in a similar cycle. My family always said I was luckier, so I had to give more. I worked 3 jobs at once and still had to send money home for my mom, for my brother. And when I tried to say no, they called me ungrateful and selfish. But after hearing what you did, how you chose yourself, it felt like someone lit a path I didn't know existed. You helped me realize that saying no isn't cruel. It's self-protection. It's preserving the most precious thing, yourself. I sat there quietly, hands wrapped around a now cold cup of tea. Outside, the wind rustled golden maple leaves, sending a few tumbling gently to the ground. But inside me, something had quietly begun to bloom. It wasn't pride. It wasn't vindication. It was the feeling of being seen, of being understood. Melanie wasn't the first person to say something like this. A few weeks earlier, an old college friend had texted me. After reading a few lines I shared on my personal blog, "I used to think you were just really strong, like you didn't need anyone. But now I get it. You were so strong that everyone assumed you'd be fine, no matter what." I had read that line over and over again. Because for years, I never asked to be heard. I stayed quiet, held it all in, but no one had ever taught me that kindness doesn't mean letting people cross your boundaries. That night, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and typed a reply to Melanie. I never imagined what I did would inspire someone like that. "Thank you for having the courage to share. I know that's not easy. But I want you to remember, you're not alone. You're not selfish. You're just learning to love yourself the right way. And there's nothing wrong with that. I hit send, and in that moment, something became crystal clear. I used to think I had lost my family, but the truth was, I was redefining it. From people who love without conditions, who give without expectation, and who respect others as full human beings. The next morning, when I pulled back the curtains, sunlight poured into the room like a gentle blessing. I took a deep breath, feeling nothing heavy on my chest anymore. I was no longer the old Alyssa, the girl who always stepped aside, who always stayed quiet for fear of upsetting others. Now, I was Alyssa who knew how to say enough, who knew when to walk away when someone didn't value her. And the most beautiful part? I wasn't alone. Because out there, somewhere, people like Melanie were finding the courage to step out of the shadows. And if my journey could light even a small part of their path, then every bit of pain I had endured was worth it. On Sunday afternoon, I strolled down the cobblestone path that led to the nearby park, where the maple trees were changing leaf by leaf, from green to gold to fiery red. A little girl rode her bike, hair flying in the wind, while her mother ran behind her, laughing and calling, "Slow down, sweetheart." I paused for a moment, holding a paper cup of coffee, watching them like a scene from a living painting. That image stirred something in me, something I had lost in recent years, a sense of lightness. I used to think I had to do everything to make my family proud. I worked tirelessly, saved every penny, gave up vacations, small dreams, just to earn a good daughter label or a nod of approval from my mother. But they never stopped to ask, was I tired? Did I need someone to listen? They just needed me to be strong. And when I stopped, when I stood up and said no, they called me ungrateful. I used to fear that. I feared being seen as selfish, feared losing the blood ties I fought so hard to preserve. But now that the dust had settled, now that the midnight calls and circular blame had gone quiet, I realized something so simple. It hurt. I didn't lose my family. I had just found myself. And that person, the Alyssa I am today, no longer lives to please anyone but herself. I started doing the little things I once put off. I learned how to cook risotto, my favorite dish that I never had time for. I bought a bright red dress, the kind I used to think was too much for the office. I signed up for a Saturday pottery class, just because the feeling of clay in my hands made me feel alive. I reorganized my apartment, hung a giant abstract painting in the living room, not because it matched. One day, I received a postcard from Kelly, a former coworker who had moved to Italy. On the back, in neat handwriting, it read, "You showed me what it means to set boundaries without guilt. Because of you, I finally had the courage to move to Rome. Something I dreamed of since I was 20 but never dared to do. Thank you, Alyssa." I placed the postcard on my desk, among the small things that carried big meaning. A stone I picked up on my first hike in Colorado, a jar of dried flowers, and the leather journal I was still writing in. They were all tiny pieces of me. An Alyssa who no longer lived to prove anything to anyone. I no longer hoped for my family to understand. I didn't wait for an apology call from Amanda or a surprise message from my mom. Maybe one day they'd look back and understand, or maybe not. And either way, that's okay. I used to think love meant holding on tightly. Now I know sometimes love means letting go, letting yourself and others be accountable for their own choices. When you stop trying to be so kind that you erase your own limits, you'll realize the people who truly value you will never ask you to burn out for them. I still remember a quote from some writer, "You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." And when I stopped burning for their expectations, I realized the warmest light doesn't come from sacrifice. It comes from the peace of living true to who you are. On that leaf-strewn path, I walked slowly. No rush, no escape, no. Alyssa's story is a powerful reminder that you are not obligated to sacrifice yourself just to preserve a relationship labeled family when it lacks respect. When you set boundaries and choose yourself, you're not being selfish. You're living truthfully. Not everyone will understand that, but the peace you find will be worth it. Because sometimes, walking away from family isn't a loss. It's the first step toward reclaiming your true self and your real worth. What do you think about Eliza's choice? Was she right to put herself before family obligations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real-life stories.